Okay, so I was searching the internet, looking for some history, and because I do like researching a lot of history by myself. But anyway, I came across this article that I'll link it to you in the description below. I don't want to actually show it, but I think that vocal commentary alone will definitely qualify for fair use because I know that they do have a copyright on it. But so let's get started. It's listovative, your source to best informative lists. I don't know if that really rolls off the tongue very well, but anyway, fair enough. What they call it, they can call it whatever they want to call it. So, top 15 greatest leaders of all time is the name of this list on one of these list websites that they have. So I think the way I'm going to do this is I'll say quote, and then I'll say something, unquote, so that you know what they say verbatim, and then I will make some commentary on it. Quote, "The world changes every day. People are born and people die. Everything, and yet life goes on." Unquote. I don't know if that's very grammatically correct. They're saying people die, everything, and yet life goes on. And by die, it's spelled D-I-E. So they're not talking about coloring everything. They're talking about people dying, and then they just put the word everything in there. And I don't know who wrote this. Well, actually, I do. It's someone, let's see here. It's at the close to the bottom of the page. And it says Shreya Samant. I don't know exactly what ethnicity that name is, but regardless of it, I'm certain that this person probably has not had a top score in English. But of course, some people are international and they never get really good at one language. So I'm going to let that slide for now. But anyway, even though I'm going to criticize this work, please do not go after this person. Do not harass this person, please. I do not want my channel to be that. Okay, so anyway, let's continue. Quote, "But in this everyday, normal things of life, sometimes people who have different flair and ability to induce a whole lot of other people are born. These are some gems because of their sheer presence and charisma, and whether or not these people use their talent for good things has always been a nature versus nurture debate." Unquote. By the way, this sentence or at least the first sentence of a couple of sentences that I just quoted, a bit weird grammatically, so I'm just saying that is how it's written. It's not like I'm stumbling over my words when I'm reading that. But anyway, let's continue. Quote, "But the world has seen many great leaders in all the parts of the world, but some of the leaders have had not only an influence on their own countries, but on the world. Now, of course, such a list is always subjective. We take into consideration here only the fact that these few were great leaders, and not whether for good or bad, the 15 greatest leaders of all time." Unquote. Okay, so first of all, going back to whether or not these people use their talent for good things has always been a nature versus nurture debate. No, it hasn't. I don't think you know the meaning of nature versus nurture debate if you use it in that context, unless it has somehow changed meaning, and I don't know the meaning. But nature versus nurture debate is whether the decisions you make are based on how you were brought up, or more on instinct. The world has seen many great leaders in all parts of the world. Okay, a bit repetitive, but some of our leaders have had not only an influence on their own countries, but on the world. Yes, yeah, that's a truism. Now, of course, such a list is always subjective. Very well. Since your list is very subjective, I will also offer my personal subjective commentary known as opinion. We take into consideration here not only the fact that these few were great leaders and whether or not, and not whether for good or bad, okay? We take into consideration here. I'm breaking this sentence down, okay? So you're taking something in consideration. Only the fact that these few were great leaders and not whether for good or bad. Okay, fair enough. I can say that some people are great leaders in the sense that they accomplish great things or are great conquerors who may have been involved in morally reprehensible acts, but nonetheless are great conquerors, which is a type of leadership, but not necessarily the best kind of leadership, but still there's a certain degree of greatness to it. So, so the 15 greatest leaders of all time, 15, Fidel Castro. Immediately, I'm underwhelmed to Fidel Castro. So, out of the 15 greatest people in all of history who have had the most influence, one of them is Fidel Castro, the ruler of Cuba. Well, former ruler nowadays. But I'm just thinking that maybe it's an order of magnitude below what I would have expected. But anyway, let's see how the writer chooses to justify this. Quote, Fidel Castro is one of the two faces of the Cuban Revolution, which started around the year 1953. End quote. I'm not going to fact check that date because it's not really too relevant to his argument. Quote, he went on to become the president and the prime minister of Cuba in the years after the Cuban Revolution. He devised and put into action the entire Cuban Revolution, during which he had to face many problems, crisis, and also many attempts of assassination. His vision, courage, and strategic analytic reasoning has gotten Cuba where it stands today. He has proven to be, over the years, a great leader and a great commander. End quote. Well, I don't know if... So they're talking about Cuba where it is today. I don't know exactly what they're talking about. I mean, internationally speaking, Cuba is sort of a controversial nation. For example, the US has had many problems with Cuba in the past. Also, the people that live in Cuba, it almost seems like they're a few decades behind, just in their standard of living compared to the rest of the Western world. So I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but hopefully this is only number 15. So hopefully we'll be seeing everyone else on the list who's better than Fidel Castro. Okay, number 14, Che Guevara. Oh my, or Che Guevara, if you're of the Anglophone persuasion. Quote, Ernesto Che Guevara, better known as El Che, or Che Guevara, was an Argentine revolutionary who was, along with Castro, the main man of the Cuban Revolution. He was a trained doctor and a guerrilla warfare leader. After finishing his education as a doctor, he took a trip across South America with his friend, and it was on the trip that he thought of a revolution. Having seen the sorry state of the people in every country, his compassion, charisma, and the love for doing good for others is what attracted so many people towards him. He has become a symbol of rebellion, and he right deserves to be so. End quote. That last clause, not too happy with that grammatically. Don't know exactly what's wrong with it, but I do know that it is not good. Anyway, moving on. The butcher of... I'm not even going to bring up his what the Cubans actually call him, the Cubans in the U.S., because universally, almost all of the Cubans in the U.S. do not like their former state of living in Cuba. So I know that they think that the U.S. is in general better than Cuba, which and they also say that they were under an oppressive regime, and Che Guevara, not the most morally upright man, but that's not what this list is about. But greatness, still a little bit underwhelmed. But two socialists on the list so far. Let's see what's next. Number 13, Alexander the Great. I'm impressed, okay. Quote, known as the man who conquered the world, Alexander the Great is often said to be the greatest military leader of all time. End quote. Yes. That I have to agree that he is one of the best. That is true. Quote, he was born in 356 BC, and by the age of 33, he had the largest empire in the history, which stretched from Greece to Egypt to India. He was a king of the kingdom, oh no, of Macedon, and perhaps he was the greatest military commander to have ever lived. He did the noble deed of unifying many Greek city-states. He was undefeated in battle and succumbed to malaria and died in 323 BC. His fortes were his foresight, vision, and military capabilities. End quote. Whether it was actually the malaria, that has not been confirmed. There's actually a number of different diseases that have been proposed that fit the symptoms that he is known to have suffered in his last days. Unifying many Greek city-states, I think it was more his father than Philip II than Alexander III to do that. But other than that, I don't really see too many problems with this. So let's move on. But just on a note, therefore, this is number 13, Alexander the Great. Every single person after this point is greater than Alexander the Great. So let's find out. 12, Asoka. Or as I like to say, Ashoka. I think there's two different ways to pronounce it. I think Ashoka is probably the more accurate one. But let's get started. Quote, another king from another kingdom who was given the title of the Great. Asoka the Great was the last of the great Indian Empire of Maurya, and he ruled from 269 BC. He too had great conquests, and his empire was almost the entire Indian subcontinent. He was a kind and a good-hearted leader. After the bloody Kalinga War, he was so deeply moved and pained by the suffering that he denounced his throne and all his wealth and adopted Buddhism. Today, he is known as an important champion of Buddhism, and he preaches the values of Buddhism and the lesson from Buddha's life to the people. Okay. So, fair enough. I'd say he was a great, end quote, oops, almost forgot. Fair enough, I think he was a great leader. The last of the great Indian Empire of Maurya, or Maurya, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I don't think so, because if he abdicated his throne, then he obviously abdicated it to someone. Just saying. It's not like he was conquered or anything. I think the empire did survive him. Buddhism, I suppose as a religious leader, that's good. But in Buddhism, I think Buddha himself is probably bigger. So I don't really know what to make of that. And also denounced his throne and all his wealth and adopted Buddhism. Okay. You don't have to denounce your throne in order to adopt Buddhism. I'm pretty sure there were some Buddhist monarchs who were actually monarchs. But next, number 11, Winston Churchill. And yes, it's not pronounced Churchill, it's Churchill, because there's only one H after the second C. I've actually looked this up, so if you'd like to debate with me on that, I have looked this up. Okay, quote, "The most crucial and most important time for a leader to show their true worth is in the face of adversity, and Winston Churchill managed to shine at the task. He was the British Prime Minister and leader during the WW2. He was an able leader, an emotional man, but his greatest victory was in his motivation for others to defend themselves against the Nazis." End quote. His greatest victory was motivational speaking. I don't know how great that is, but we'll get back on that. Quote, "His determination, perseverance, and a patriotic devotion towards the nation moved the Britishers to go forward and win the war with the help of the Allies. Keep calm and carry on," he said, "and won the war and the hearts." End quote. Britishers, I do not believe that is a proper ethnonym for the British. Of course, anybody British in the comment section, if you would prefer to be called Britishers, then feel free to. I mean, it is a rather subjective thing, not too subjective, but still subjective to some degree. So I personally do not think he was the greatest PM of the UK. Overall, nor do I think that he was the greatest leader in World War II to come out on top, because I think Stalin did a lot more to hit the Nazis than the British did. But as you can see in looking at where the casualties are in World War II, the Eastern Front, the Germans lost a lot. So, so I'd say in order, the Russians, the British, then the Americans, in order of how much they helped win World War II for the Allies. The Americans got in late, so not as much glory there, but still some. So I'm assuming maybe they'll have... Oh well, never mind. Let's move on. Number 10, Julius Caesar, or also known as, in Latin, Julius Caesar. That's correct. Classical Latin. Quote, "Julius Caesar was a Roman military commander and a genius, to say the very least." End quote. To say the very least. I like this already. Quote, "He played a critical role in the death of the Roman Republic and the rise of a strong Roman Empire. He was not only quick and smart on the battlefield, but he also devised great strategies and plan for the expansion of the empire, and his political finesse, but with a power of which he conquered almost all of with the help of which he conquered almost all of Western Europe. His decisiveness, abilities to outwit his opponents, made it possible for him to gain a strong following. He was eventually assassinated by his friend Brutus. The famous Shakespearean tragedy Julius Caesar is based on his life." End quote. I don't know exactly how close Caesar was to Brutus. I don't think it's as close as the play implies. But also, back on Churchill, why is he above Alexander the Great? I disapprove of Churchill being above Alexander the Great in greatness. I disapprove. Julius Caesar, he's up there. I'd say if this is a subjective opinion, then sure, you can put him above Alexander the Great if you really want to, if you really like. Okay. Next, number 9, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Oh, why? Open quote. Franklin Roosevelt, also called FDR, was an American statesman and a political leader who helped America during some of the worst years, like the Great Depression. Roosevelt was afflicted with polio at the age of 29, and he was left paralyzed in both his legs. And yet, he went on to become president in 1933, and he is the only president who was elected 4 consecutive times till 1945, when he died. He also led the America military into World War II and made America rise to power. His political knowledge, yearning to never stop, are characteristics that every true leader longs to have. Alright, FDR. By the way, it is Roosevelt, not Roosevelt. That is another proven fact. Worst years like the Great Depression. Okay. But he didn't really make a golden age, though, so I wouldn't really call that greatness so much as damage control. The fact that he had polio and was paralyzed is irrelevant, because that's not actually an achievement. Because, well, wait, stop. Just a moment. He was left paralyzed in both his legs. I know that FDR was able to stand. I know that for a fact. It's just that he generally chose not to, because his disease left him in a weakened state. But he was able to stand. So I don't know if paralyzed is entirely accurate. He also led the World War II, and made America rise to power. Well, America already had a lot of power. I don't know if America really rose to power. And also, the World War II, the war economy, didn't really stop the Great Depression so much as it removed focus from it. His political knowledge, yearning to never stop, are characteristics that every true leader longs to have. Now, I have to say that politically, on a political level, on an ideological level, I personally think that FDR was one of my on my naughty list for presidents. But that's just me. Number 8. Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleone Bonaparte. Maybe. Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, quote, Napoleon Bonaparte was a French military leader who rose to power after the French Revolution, which overthrew the monarchy. He was shrewd and cunning, and a person who knew that bigger numbers did not always mean bigger strength. His small armies are known to have triumphed over larger armies. The Napoleonic Code of Legal Reforms, which he formed, is used till date in many places. His military leadership and the regard for the common man made him famous, and he ruled and influenced France for many years. End quote. Okay. Let's get started. Rose to power after the French Revolution, which overthrew the monarchy, and then Napoleon is also a monarch. I think maybe getting a little bit more specific on that would have helped. That there was a republic in between the monarchy. That may have helped. Okay. Shrewd and cunning, and a person who knew that bigger numbers did not always mean bigger strength. Small armies triumphing over larger armies. With the top 15 greatest leaders of all time, that's basically a given. It's not really impressive at this point, at this order of magnitude. The Napoleonic Code of Legal Reforms, which he formed, is still used till date in many places. Okay, fair enough. So he was a capable leader, and he did change a lot about the world. So sure, we can put him here. Fair enough. I can put him in the top 15. I don't know if he'd be my personal choice, but I'll put them there. Okay, military leadership, common man. Okay, fair enough. Number 7, George Washington. Quote, the founding father of the United States of America, George Washington, is till date one of the greatest leaders that we have ever seen. End quote. Okay, George Washington is greater than Alexander the Great. He's greater than Ashoka the Great. He's greater than Julius Caesar. He's greater than Napoleon, says the person who wrote this article. So, let's get back to it. Quote, he led the American Revolution and later led USA into the first few years of its independence as the first president of USA. End quote. No. And I'm going to be honest here, okay? The USA got independent technically the war started 1775, so technically they were already ruling themselves at that point, but they declared independence 1776, and it wasn't until the 1780s and 1790s, late 1780s, early 1790s, when presidents started appearing of the USA, and in the sense that we know today. Before that, there were presidents of the Continental Congress, there was the Articles of Confederation, and there were many presidents, in fact, before George Washington. So first president of the USA is wrong. First few years of its independence is wrong. In fact, George Washington never was, as far as I know, the president of the Continental Congress. In fact, at time of Declaration of Independence, it was John Hancock. Just my history knowledge there, so this is not accurate. He led the American Revolution. Yes, he was, I believe, the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. So let's continue. Quote, he was a visionary and he had immense vision for America, which led America to become the superpower it is today. End quote. I don't think his vision was like that. I think it was more an idealistic, let's say, administrative and legislative vision rather than a territorial vision. I don't know how much there was manifest destiny in the 1790s. Well, there probably was, because Virginia colony was promised coast to coast, as was Massachusetts Bay Colony, I believe. And a number of these colonies were promised coast to coast originally. But I don't think that he personally had a vision that was then fulfilled by later presidents. I think the later presidents had their own determination and their own visions, and that's what they went for. So overall, I can't say that he's the greatest president that the U.S. has ever had. Now, greater than FDR, definitely. But if you just go for raw greatness, who made the U.S. most powerful, I'd have to maybe say James K. Polk on that, because he got Oregon Country, Texas, and Alta California all in his presidency. That's the entire West, basically. Everything west of the Louisiana Territory, annexed by James K. Polk. And he fulfilled the manifest destiny, so he actually had the vision to do it, and he only did it in one term as well. So if he's not... Never mind. I'm not even going to say if he's not on there, because I know he's probably not going to be on there. Okay. Number 6, Adolf Hitler. Quote, Now, many people will argue and disagree with the fact that a man like Hitler is called a great leader, but we have to say that although his actions and deeds were not good, but his leadership skills were matched only by a few in the world. He became the Chancellor of Germany in 1933, rising through the ranks and waged a great war. But his oratory skills, military expansions, and economic growth plans are something whose credit you'll have to duly give him, and him alone. End quote. So, nobody else helped him with his publicity. Nobody else helped him with his military plans. Nobody else helped him with his economic policy. Is that what you're saying? Because I don't think that that's accurate at all, or even possible. Quote, meticulous planning, propaganda, and strategizing by Hitler has in some way shaped the power politics of a world that we see even today. End quote. Okay, I'm just going to come out and say this. Was Germany greater at the time that Hitler took power than at the time that Hitler lost power? Now, let's take a look at this. Population growth. A lot of Germans died in World War II. So let's say that's one category where it's not really greater. Territory. At the time that Hitler died, most of Germany was already under Allied occupation, and so that's in fact a reduction in territory, which is bad. Economically, when Hitler took power, the economy was bad, as in massive hyperinflation. Things had gone really out of hand. Basically, what the USA will look like in 20 years from now. Oh, no, just joking. Who knows? Maybe the US will get straight on its path. But anyway, you might say, well, how about after the war? It was non-existent. The German territory was invaded. Their economy was completely collapsed. It was bombed by the British, bombed by the Americans. Bam, economy gone. Military. Okay, his military was a bit more powerful, but he did lose a ton of soldiers in the war. So overall, I have to say that Germany was weaker after Hitler's rule than before, and it didn't really recover much until recently. So overall, I have to say that puts him in the negative on leadership qualities for me. So, sorry, Hitler. You do not belong in this list. Sorry. I'm not saying, and that's not even mentioning any moral aspects. I'm just talking about objectively, was Germany more powerful? And it wasn't. Mao Zedong. Quote, we can see that some of the greatest leaders have spurted as the ones who leaded a change in a particular place. End quote. Leaded? Really? Really? Please stop. Who are you? What are you doing? It's time to stop. Who are your parents? Are you in middle school or something? Don't actually tell me, because I don't really want to know. But I'm just saying, called Child Protective Service. No. Bit too filthy frank there. But bad grammar. And let's continue. Quote, Mao Zedong similarly was the leader of the Chinese Revolution and the founder of People's Republic of China, the China we see today. End quote. Yeah, sure. Okay. Quote, he withheld the Japanese invasion, kick-started the economy of China, and helped it become the superpower it is today. End quote. First of all, let's just get this over with. He did not withhold the Japanese invasion alone. The Kuomintang, the other party in China, probably not pronouncing it correctly, had to ally with him at some point, And that's not to mention that there were a lot of British soldiers who were helping in China as well as in the later stages of the war, there were also Americans who were running bombings and stuff over the Japanese occupied China. So I think you're giving him more credit than he's due. Give credit where it's due, I always say. That's why I'm actually putting this article in the description of the video. Kickstarted the economy of China and helped it become the superpower it is today. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. The Great Leap Forward, okay? He decided, we're going to give all this stuff in agriculture and etc. Grain production dropped 15% and then 10% more, or maybe it was the other way around, and it did not grow afterwards for quite a while, and millions of Chinese starved. I don't think that's economically good. Just saying. The Cultural Revolution has been described by people after Mao as probably one of the worst decisions that the Chinese Communist Party had ever made. So, I think China has become the power it is today more recently rather than in the time of Mao. So let's continue. Quote, his vision for China is what him and the people of China strive for. His ideologies and principles of governance and economics are now known as Maoism, end quote. And if you look at the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, they did not work. Just saying, they did not work. Okay, number 4, Abraham Lincoln. Is he greater than Alexander the Great? No. I'll just have to say that. No. In terms of power. I'm not talking about morally or anything. Okay. Quote, it takes a man with a vision to lead a country during its bad times. End quote. A vision? No, it doesn't. It takes a man with leadership skills to lead a country during its bad times. Thank you very much. Quote, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of USA, led the country through the U.S. Civil War. He strived hard and did his best to keep the people of the country together, or else today America would have been many smaller countries instead of one big country. End quote. What is this? Is this alternate history here? Are you trying to say alternate history? Because if we look at the evidence, let's just look at the evidence, it would have been, the US may have united after at some point, or the North could have decided to acquiesce to the South's demands, and then they could have reconciled. Or maybe it would have been two countries. How would you say that there are many smaller countries? This is just a point where your alternate history is going way out of proportion. It's just not entirely accurate, just saying. If you're going to make an alternate history claim, you should at least put in some evidence as to why you think that would have happened. Okay, quote, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, thereby ending slavery in U.S. End quote. No, that's not true. He signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but that did not end slavery in the U.S. What actually outlawed it was the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And then the subsequent two amendments were used to reinforce that, as well as stop racial inequality. And also, the Emancipation Proclamation only applied to actual Confederate states it did not apply to Union states that practiced slavery. Because, little known fact, the U.S. Civil War was not about slavery. It was about economics. But, it's always about money. But it was not about slavery, and we know it's not about slavery because there were states in the North that had slaves. Mind blown for all of you historians that did not know that. Quote, he heart ached for the ones for whom he could not do anything, end quote. Please edit that. Somebody, please edit that. That is just wrong as language. Quote, his conviction, military oratory skills made him one of the greatest leaders we have ever had. End quote. We, who's we? Is this written by an American? Because if it is, that is even more shameful for the grammar. But fair enough. Okay. Number 3, Martin Luther King Jr. Interesting. Quote, it all started with a dream, like it always does. A dream for change and a dream for a better tomorrow. Martin Luther King Jr. was an activist and a leader in the civil rights movement of USA. He was also a member of the clergy. He is known for the nonviolent ways in which he advanced and led the civil rights movement. He fought for racial equality and showed the people a picture of a better future where all men are equal. End quote. I'm just putting this out there. A lot of the people that claim to be successors to Martin Luther King Jr. did not share this vision with him. They, in fact, he had a non-segregated vision. These people, that a lot of these people had a segregated vision. And I'm not saying white people who claim to be his successors. I'm talking about members in the black community. Some of them, also part of the clergy, decided that, you know what, desegregation, no thank you. Segregation, yes please. And in recent years, this has led to race issues because good old Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision was not really fulfilled by those who claimed that they were his successors. But anyway, quote, courage, perseverance, and the will to fight for what's right till the very end made him a great leader. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. End quote. Okay, let me just say this. I have great respect and admiration for Martin Luther King Jr. I like his policies on race. I also like his policies on guns. He was against gun control. Just putting that out there. And I think that he is a very respectable person, but I do not believe that he has the greatness of magnitude to be on this list. Because number 1, he was this civil rights movement leader in one country. Number 2, he was a civil rights movement leader, and which is a leader of a popular movement rather than an actual political leader. So that actually puts him on an order of magnitude lower. I'm not saying that he's inferior to these people, because morally he's superior to a lot of the people that I would put on the greatness list. But he is just not great in the sense that conventionally greatness is thought of. But on the other hand, he's one of my favorite guys. Very quotable. Okay. Number 2, Nelson Mandela, another socialist. Interesting trend. Quote, no one needs an introduction for this great man. Nelson Mandela was the first democratically elected president of South Africa. End quote. Let's just put this out there. He was the first democratically elected president of South Africa. But that's only because he was the first one to hold the title of strictly president. because South Africa has had leaders that are democratically elected. Not as democratically as Mandela, of course, due to apartheid, but that were democratically elected long before Mandela came around. Just saying. Just saying maybe the writer should have perhaps clarified on that a little bit, because South Africa has existed a lot longer than Mandela. Okay, quote, he was a leader and a face of the anti-apartheid movement, and all through his life he relentlessly fought against racial discrimination. For his actions, he served a long prison sentence, but even that did not deter him. He came out as a hero and led the country into a free, equal future. His determination, focus, and willpower were tremendous, that even after serving almost 30 years in jail, he got out and worked again for what was right. End quote. So let me just put this out there as well. I like the anti-apartheid movement. And Mandela, I think I've never known him personally, so I can't really make too much of a judgment on this, but I think he's probably a very morally good character. I just disapprove of his socialist policies, and also South Africa, not the greatest country in the world. I'm just saying, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, those were the high points of his list. After that, it hasn't really been up to par, for me anyway. Okay, number 1, Mahatma Gandhi. Or Gandhi, as some say. Quote, born an ordinary boy, Mohandas Karamchand, or Kandhand, I don't know, Gandhi, he became known as the father of a nation, or Bapu. Mahatma Gandhi led India against the tyrannical rule of the Britishers, end quote. There it is again. Quote, he fought silently and practiced ahimsa, or non-violence. He believed the truth, and only truth, shall prevail, and without harming a single soul, he got freedom to India. Civil disobedience movements, boycotts of foreign goods, etc., he showed his resistance towards the British. Eventually the British left India, and Gandhi became the face of a nation. He is without doubt one of the greatest leaders to have ever walked the earth, end quote. I disagree, but that's a subjective list. And yeah, Gandhi is actually a pretty interesting individual. He was all non-violence and everything, but he was very strategic about how he did this. He was, I think, very manipulative in that sense. Not necessarily in a bad way. Also, anti-gun control Gandhi. Very good. Just putting that out there. Gandhi was against gun control. But anyway, if you have any opinions on what I said, then please comment. You can follow me on Twitter as well as Google+. And, oh my goodness, the comments, they're debating whether Jesus was a historical individual, as in somebody who was actually real, not actually whether the things that he did was real, but whether he was actually real. And I have to say that historical evidence does show that. But let's see, related posts at the bottom of the page. Top 7 amazing unheard Vicks Vapor Rub uses. Not the kind of article I would make, but I think stuff like that used to be used as currency in some South American nation when their currency collapsed, because it's actually something that's useful. And why not gold standard, everybody? Okay, top 9 plants commonly found in deserts. Ugh, sounds dreadful. Top 12 women freedom fighters of India. My goodness, potentially interesting. Didn't know that there were that many women freedom fighters. Top 10 worst, most dangerous earthquakes of all time. Worst, most dangerous. Doesn't sound correct to me. Top 10 awesome everyday things about Japan that will amaze you. Okay. 12 different types of noses and what they mean. please know this is probably useless. What noses mean? Unless you're talking about genetics or something, then other than that, it's not accurate at all. Top 20 popular business tycoons who are college dropouts. 10 reasons Donald Trump shouldn't win the U.S. presidential election. That actually sounds interesting. I'll actually comment on that soon, actually. Wow, the video has gone on for 50 minutes. My goodness, this is going to be a long video. Anyway, I will be seeing you all next time on Awiltos. Over and out. You can donate on Patreon if you really, really want to.